Hi, it's Mitch from PickDawgz.com, and it is Wednesday, May 29th, 2024, here with your first 5 innings picks for today. Of course, normally we do first halves and first 5 innings, but today just first 5 innings because that's all we got to work with, so we'll make it work. We got 16 Major League Baseball games on the card. Of course, one of our features of this show that we do every day. Today in history, today in 1990, Rickey Henderson stole his 893rd career base. He passed Ty Cobb on the all-time list. That's one of the big ones. There's some records that are out there that are kind of like, adjusted because of the way the game is and all that stuff. Stolen base record, and live ball, all that stuff, it doesn't make a difference. Rickey Henderson, 893rd. Stolen base. But anyways, of course, we're going to steal some of the books' money today. We're going to beat them up and take them out early in the first 5 innings of these games. Let's get right to today's action. We get an early start today as we head to Detroit, where the Pirates are visiting the Tigers. Game 1 of a doubleheader after yesterday's rainout. These are the exact same pitchers that were scheduled for yesterday's game. It's Skubal for the Tigers and Jared Jones for the Pirates. My opinion on this one really hasn't changed much. 2 good pitchers pitching well. Jones's numbers regressing just slightly as, these young pitchers, sometimes, that first year, as the season goes on, they wear down a little bit. Sometimes they bounce out of it. Sometimes they don't. Skubal, meanwhile, we know this guy has always had good stuff, but when he misses, he seems to always pay the price. He's one of those pitchers, and we see his numbers just slightly higher than his season numbers, 3.12 over his last 3 starts. When we look at the way the Tigers and Pirates are hitting the baseball, the Tigers certainly hitting righties well, 289 over the last 10 games. The Pirates just 224 versus lefties. Even though the Pirates have absolutely owned the Tigers in Detroit, I'm going to roll with the Tigers in the first 5 of this one, and that's going to be my pick for this game. For our next game, we head to Cincinnati, where the Reds are taking on the Cardinals for Game 3 of their series. It's Frankie Montas on the bump for the Reds and Andre Pallante on the mound for the Cardinals. Originally I thought it was going to be Matthew Liberatore starting this game for the Cards, but now it's Pallante making his first start of the year. But regardless of who starts this game, this is a bullpen game for the Cardinals. And Pallante certainly, while he hasn't started a game yet this season, he certainly has played in some games, and he has been knocked around, giving up 14 hits in 10 innings. Doesn't give up a lot of home runs, doesn't give up a lot of walks, but still a pretty decent amount for the amount that he's pitched. But really, it's those hits that are the problem. Meanwhile, Montas, we know this guy's an implosion waiting to happen at any given moment. That 6.32 ERA over his last 3 starts. I expect the Cardinals to come out swinging in this one, in this game. Certainly hitting the ball a lot better than the way the Reds are. 290 versus righties over their last 10 games. I'm going to take the Cardinals in the first 5 as my pick for this game. We go to Texas, where the Rangers are hosting the Diamondbacks in a rematch of last year's World Series. It's Dane Dunning on the mound for the Rangers and Ryan Nelson on the mound for the Diamondbacks. Tell you what, I bet on Nelson a few weeks ago, and it's one of those games that just left a mark on me. It got absolutely bludgeoned by the Tigers. But, at the same time, Dane Dunning, not a guy that we can really trust either, as both these pitchers have certainly had these share of problems. Of course, 2 righties going today, and the D-backs hitting righties at 256 over their last 10 games. The Rangers just 202, down from their season average of 243. Of course, we know the Rangers can absolutely slug the baseball, but the problem is that they've got injuries in this lineup. Also, of course, in their starting rotation. The D-backs, well, they're just generally not fast starters, and they weren't a fast starter last year. But Nelson comes in with a 9.88 ERA over his last 3 starts. Dunning, like I said, no prize, 4.05 over his last 3. I still like the Rangers in the first 5, and that's going to be my pick for this game. For our next game, we head to Detroit for Game 2 of the doubleheader at Comerica Park. A lot of factors in this game that make this one of the tougher calls, at least for this early video. Something that I gotta say, you're probably gonna need to tune into our live show today to get some sort of update on this thing, because Paul Skeens is on the mound for the Pirates, but the Tigers have not announced who their starter is going to be. So the factors here are that it's Game 2 of a doubleheader, so you're never really sure who's going to be in the lineup when that happens. And then the Tigers not announcing their starting pitcher yet, well, that presents more problems. But at the same time, the Pirates have had a lot of success in Detroit. I'm not expecting that in the first game today, but I think in this game, with the way that Skeens has been pitching, I expect the Pirates to come out gangbusters. I don't know what kind of price we're going to get on this one either, as they don't have the odds out on this game. I do like the Pirates in the first 5 innings. I also think that it goes under. Like I said, there's no odds or anything like that, so just on a hunch here, I'm going to go with the Pirates and the under and go give out 2 picks in this one. For our next game, we go to San Francisco, where the Giants are hosting the Phillies. It's Kyle Harrison on the mound for the Giants and Chris Sanchez on the mound for the Phillies in a battle of left-handed pitchers. You know, this is one of a few of the series of these early week series where it's just one of these odd spots where the visiting team has had no luck historically in the opponent's ballpark. And Philly really has never really played all that well in San Francisco, and we're seeing that play out in this series. Harrison hasn't pitched all that well lately, with his 3.90 season ERA ballooning up to 6.00 over his last 3 starts, while Sanchez has pretty much stayed the course, 3.15 and 3.00. But both of these teams just murdering left-handed pitching for the season and over their last 10 games, with the Phillies batting .262 and the Giants batting .250 for the season. But over the last 10, .257 for the Phillies and .299 for the Giants. Man, I think this one, I don't think the trend reverses here. I'm going to take the Giants in the first 5 as my pick for this one. For our next game, we go to Petco Park in San Diego, where the Padres are taking on the Marlins. Yu Darvish on the mound for the Padres and Braxton Garrett on the mound for the Marlins. Yu Darvish coming off his worst start of the season and possibly one of the worst starts of his career, as it looked like home run derby against the Yankees. It appeared that he was tipping his pitches. Meanwhile, Braxton Garrett, after 2 rough starts to start his season, in his third start, his last time out, 9 innings, no runs allowed, a complete game shutout on 95 pitches. You just don't see a lot of those in Major League Baseball anymore, but it was just absolutely textbook performance. But his ERA is still at 5.30 for the season, and that's because of those first 2 starts. The Marlins and Padres, neither of these teams really hitting all that well in this series, though the Padres are hitting .261 versus lefties for the season, not really hitting that high. The Marlins .242 versus righties over their last 10. But I still think this one probably belongs to the pitchers. I think Darvish bounces back. I think Garrett, stays the course. I'm going to take the under in the Padres-Marlins as my pick for this one. For our next game, we go to Citi Field in New York, where the Mets are hosting the Dodgers. Boy, we saw the Mets bullpen implode once again late in that one against the Dodgers yesterday. Certainly had a chance to win that game and let it all slip away. It wasn't just the bullpen imploding. It was the failure to convert on opportunities with the bases loaded with 1 out in the bottom of the 9th inning in a tie game. Didn't get a run across the plate. But in this one, it's David Peterson on the mound for the Mets, and it is James Paxton on the mound for the Dodgers. We know Paxton, we've seen Paxton, and I'll tell you, James Paxton certainly has the ability to walk in everybody. He has over 20 walks on the season so far. David Peterson making his first start, but he was impressive in the minor leagues, and I'd say there's going to be some value out there on this one. The Dodgers are hitting lefties at .268 over the last 10 games, and that's about their season average. The Mets hitting lefties at just .233 over their last 10, but I'll tell you what, I like the way Peterson looked in the minors. I don't like James Paxton. I'll take the Mets in the first 5, and that's going to be my pick for this game. For our next game, we go to Baltimore, where the Orioles are hosting the Red Sox. A lot of people bashing our friend Ron Romanelli and his picks of the Red Sox yesterday, but it was all Red Sox in that game. It'll be interesting to see how many of you YouTube commenters come back with your tail between your legs after that one-sided beatdown. For today, the Orioles go with Corbin Burnes, former Cy Young Award winner, up against Cutter Crawford for the Red Sox. Crawford's got a 2.89 ERA for the season, but over his last 3 games, down to up to 6.89, while Burnes down to 2.00 over his last 3 games. Of course, we know what we're going to get from Corbin Burnes, and that is a solid effort every single time out. The Orioles hitting right-handed pitching at .254 over their last 10. The Red Sox at .239 over their last 10. And these are fairly consistent with their season numbers, though the Orioles definitely about 25 points higher over their last 10 games. I think this one's going to be pretty tight. I'm going to go with the under in the first 5 of the Orioles Red Sox as my pick. We head to Tampa Bay, where the Rays are taking on the A's. The Rays generally slow starters to a series and then certainly pour it on from then. And that kind of has been the way that they've been for a very long time. But the thing is, against the Oakland A's, they've absolutely owned them, winning eight of the last 11 meetings of these two teams, even though the Rays really not playing very good baseball coming into this one, just 1-7 in their last 8 games. Ryan Pepiot gets the ball here for the Rays. It's up Joey Estes on the mound for the A's. Estes 7.47 ERA coming in, while Pepiot 3.98, but ballooning to 4.50 over his last 3 starts. Really hasn't developed yet into what the Rays hope he can be. The Rays are just not hitting right-handed pitching, 191 over their last 10 games, while the A's at 254, over their last 10 games. I don't know. I just think that the Rays are the better team, but the A's, well, at least in the early going, I'll give them the nod. I'll take the A's as my pick for the first 5. For our next game, we go to Atlanta, where the Braves are taking on the Nationals in Game 3 of their series. It's been 1 game apiece so far. And in this one, interesting one, is Mackenzie Gore takes the bump for the Nats, but it's Spencer Schwellenbach on the mound for the Braves, making his first major league start. And the Braves digging deep into the minor league system, heading down to Double-A to bring up their number 3 prospect overall. Schwellenbach certainly shows that he has good stuff, and of course the Braves believe in him if they're bringing up to the majors all the way from Double-A. Meanwhile, on the other side, Mackenzie Gore starting to develop into the pitcher the Nationals believed he would be, as he really is racking up the strikeouts this season. We look at the way these guys are hitting. The Nats versus lefties, 296 over their last 10 games. The Braves, 250 versus right-handed pitching. Well, I'm interested in seeing Schwellenbach, and I'm sure he's going to be a good one. I don't know. I just think that the way the Nats are hitting lefties, I got to give them the nod in the first 5 innings of this game. For our next game, we head to Target Field in Minnesota, where the Twins are taking on the Kansas City Royals. It's been all Twins in this series, in one of those games, one of those series where you look at the numbers and it just doesn't add up to what we've seen on the field. That what it's added up to is those historical numbers, as the Royals just 10-25 in their last 35 versus the Twins, and 13-38 in their last 51 in Minnesota. Seth Lugo on the bump here for the Royals. It's Bailey Ober on the mound for the Twins. Ober's been good, but he's been hit and miss. 4.11 ERA over his last 3 starts, down from 4.33 for the season, while Lugo a consistent 1.74 ERA. The Royals, of course, hitting right-handed pitching better than the Twins, 263 to 219 over their last 10 games, and 240 to 217 for the season. It hasn't mattered in this series, but I think in this one, I think Lugo overpowers him, and Ober, he's been hit and miss. He probably misses here. I'm going to go for the Royals to get the first 5, and that's going to be my pick in this game. For our next game, we head to the south side of Chicago, where the White Sox are hosting the Blue Jays. It's been all Blue Jays this series, just like it was in their last series in Toronto. In fact, the Jays 16-5 in their last 21 full games against the White Sox. It's Chris Flexen on the mound for the White Sox, up against Alek Manoah for the Jays. Manoah, of course, was seen as the phenom coming up. Got into the majors, pitched really well, and all of a sudden the wheels just fell off the cart. He went to the minors, got beaten up there. The Jays brought him back up despite some poor performances in the minors, and he's pitched well in the majors, but last time out, we started to see the Manoah that got knocked around again. So while he's got a 1.93 ERA over his last 3 starts and 3.97 on the season, we saw some very bad signs last time out. Meanwhile, Flexen going from 5.69 to 9.45 in the ERA, and the White Sox really not hitting the baseball, but they are hitting better against lefties, and I think they get to Manoah as well. I'm going to take the White Sox first 5 as my pick for this one. For our next game, we head to Milwaukee, where the Brewers are taking on the Cubs. On Tuesday night, a 9th-inning rally for the Brewers turned into a 10th-inning disaster as their pitcher got hit with a line drive. The Cubs ended up scoring on that play and then scored a bunch more. The Brewers just mounted some offense, but it just wasn't enough to come back once again. Today, the Brewers try to bounce back with Bryce Wilson on the mound up against Shota Imanaga, who missed his last start because there was a rainout. The Cubs didn't push him back a day. Instead, they let them go all the way through the rotation again. So it's been a while since we've seen Imanaga. Thing is, the Brewers, have hit generally fairly well against left-handed pitching, but as of late, just 168 over their last 10 games. The Cubs aren't hitting at all versus righties or lefties. And I think, in this particular game, what we've seen from the Brewers is a lot of resiliency, and I think that they're resilient in this one. I think they get to Imanaga, and I think they win the first 5 as well. I'll take the Milwaukee Brewers. For our next game, we head to Coors Field in Colorado, where the Rockies are taking on the Guardians. Anyone that thinks that baseball is a boring sport, well, you probably missed the first couple games of this series, because these games have been very exciting in Colorado. A lot of offense, if that's your thing as well. Ty Blach gets the ball for this one for the Rockies, up against Logan Allen for the Guardians. Logan Allen has a 4.89 ERA for the season, but just 1.53 over his last 3 starts, while Blach 4.55 for the season and 5.52 for the season. Of course, he pitches half of his games in Coors Field, so you kind of have to level out the ERA when it does that. But both these teams hitting lefties extremely well. 260 over their last 10 for the Rockies, 259 for the Guardians, and both these teams have been hitting lefties pretty much all season long, so it's not just a fluke little run. I have to say that in this particular game and in this series, the pitchers have been losing. I like the over in the Guardians-Rockies, and that's going to be my pick for the first 5 of this game. For our next game, we go to Anaheim, where the Angels are hosting the Yankees. I'll tell you, we've got a good series going on here. As the Angels certainly not a very good team this season, the Yankees one of the best teams, but the Yankees, they never really seem to play all that well in Anaheim, despite going 6-2 overall on the road in their last 8 games. Tyler Anderson on the bump here for the Angels, and it's Lewis Heel on the mound for the Yankees. Anderson, throughout his career has had his share of struggles, but he had one really good season with the Dodgers. That's an outlier season. And this year looks very similar to that season. He's got a 2.52 ERA for the season, 2.08 over his last 3 starts, while Heel, 2.11 for the season, 0.49 for his last 3 games. He's been outstanding. Looking at how these teams are hitting the baseball, well, the Angels hitting 218 versus righties, the Yankees 214 versus lefties. I'll tell you what, both these pitchers, tough as nails. I like the under in the first 5 of the Angels-Yankees as my pick for this game. For our final game of the card, we go to Seattle, where the Mariners are hosting the Houston Astros. The Astros just seem to not be able to get past that little bump. It's like every time they go on a little run, they start to regress a little bit. And today's starter, Justin Verlander, of course, he is the stopper of the Astros rotation, but he's been getting hit pretty decently in his last couple of starts, even though he's got a 2.55 over his last 3. One of those was because he had a shutout in there, and that's what lowers those numbers. Meanwhile, George Kirby on the mound for the Mariners. I think this kid's going to be something special, but maybe we got ahead of ourselves in him, as he hasn't looked all that strong with a 4.33 ERA and a 4.74 over his last 3 games. The thing is that the Astros hitting righties pretty well recently, 281. That number is way down in this series, and the Mariners hitting just 222 versus righties. But the big thing is Justin Verlander's a Mariners killer. The Astros are 15-2 in Verlander's last 17 starts versus the Mariners. I think they would win the first 5 as well. I'm going to take the Houston Astros as my pick. That wraps up today's show. All first 5 innings picks on today's card. Of course, tomorrow we'll have NBA back in action as well. So we'll have first half and first 5 innings, which will be the general format of this show. And a lot of the year it'll just be first halves, and there'll be that small portion of the summer where it's all first 5 innings. But regardless, we're going to be here every single day with the picks and all that action. Of course, our best bets are always over at PickDawgz.com under the Premium Picks tab. You can use the discount code PICK to take 15% off. And if you're looking for cool gear like the stuff that I wear and the rest of our PickDawgz crew wear, we have that all available on the website underneath the merch tab. I've also got a link in the description for the premium picks as well as the merch, so check that all out. Anyways, this is Mitch. Thanks for joining me for these first 5 innings picks for today. I'll be back tomorrow. It'll be NBA and Major League Baseball on a shorter card.